A couple questions come in. Let's, some of the topics we've covered. You had mentioned that we're graduating more folks than ever, but that we still have some room for improvement related to the dropout rate. And so a couple questions around the dropout rate. What specifically are we working on to address the dropout rate? And then another angle to that is, would improving vocational education help improve the dropout rate?
Let's look at the numbers. When a kid starts ninth grade, we will graduate about 70% of those students in 4 years. So that means there's a 30% who aren't graduating in 4 years. Now, a smaller percentage of them will graduate in the 5th year. They'll stay. Some of them will go on to the adult program at Cape Fear Community College. So at the end of the day, there's still about a 20% gap of kids who aren't graduating with a high school diploma. And that's obviously something I'm concerned about. So you look at a couple of things. When we look at what happens is, if they don't have a good, strong reading foundation, and that's early education, that's the pre-K to 3, it's a struggle for them as they move up the chain. Transition years, 8th to 9th grade. If you think about K-8 education, it's a pretty sheltered kind of environment where you've got the teacher, you got to walk to lunch, you're walk down the halls, and all of a sudden we're going to take this 14, 15-year-old kid and say, you're going to go into a high school with 2,000 kids. Have at it. You got 10 minutes to figure out where you're going. Nobody's there to help you. So we really got to look at our transition programs, what we're doing to support those kids coming in. We know the data, so if we got a kid who's identified as at risk coming into the high school, why aren't we finding that kid on day one and working with that student to make sure that they're successful? And we're starting to do that. We've got some dropout pieces that are in there, and we think that'll have some success. We're doing a better job of tracking those kids coming across so the high school knows who they are. There's certain risk factors. If you were suspended, failed reading or math in middle school, then you're a high risk for a dropout. And so if we know the data, we should be able to pick those kids coming up and work with them. And I think we're doing a good job of that in increasing those programs. We brought in a task force to look at that data, so that's one part of it. We'll do a presentation to our board tomorrow night on that. The second part of the question is vocational education. I grew up in New England, where there was 2 traditional high schools and a vocational high school. North Carolina has never been a big vocational high school separate building. What they've always done is vocational education on site. And I will tell you, we do a lot of vocational education in our schools. Traditional things such as automotive, health, culinary arts, we're doing those in our high schools. And then we partner with community college. A lot of our students go to community college to get what we would consider vocational courses. And as you look at funding, as the state cuts back community college funding, that impacts our ability at the high school to get kids into some of those vocational courses over there, because they're not going to bump their students for a high school student. So we've seen a shrinking in what's called Huskins courses, which are those courses that kids can take over there over the last couple of years as budgets have shrunk. But I think as we swing out of the budget in the next year or so, past this year, that we'll be able to increase that. But we offer a pretty wide range of vocational courses already at our high schools. But what we find is the standards for vocational courses are just as high as they are for other courses. You can't just walk into an automotive course if you're a failing student. And that's what some folks don't understand. They think of, well, if the kid's not succeeding on the academic side, put them into a vocational side. The world today is you've got to have good math skills, good English skills, good reading skills to succeed in the vocational force. When you think about the jobs that are out there, the days of an assembly line where you could put the same rivet onto that car for 8 hours a day aren't there. The robot piece does that. What they're looking for is somebody to fix the robot on when it breaks down. And so we've got to make sure that those kids going into workforce development have the same level of skills as those going into a 4-year college, because the level of basic skills isn't that different anymore.
Okay, you talked about the importance of teachers and principals, and I think Fred at table 1, if we could get a microphone over, has a question about that. And
yes, Tim, I just wanted to find out what metrics are being used to measure or evaluate the performance of the teachers and principals. I mean, what's being used and how is it being applied?
Teacher evaluation in North Carolina is set by the state, and they've just adopted a whole new matrix and rubric for teacher evaluation. So we're bringing our teachers on board in terms of that, and they've gone to more of a growth model, sort of like where we are with students. We want to see where they're at and then how much we can improve them. Now, there are other school-wide measures, test scores, you look at those, graduation rates, you look at those, college placement rates, those are the more traditional measures. You look at some of the, when you look at those kinds of metrics, those are what I would call the more traditional metrics. If you look at our system performance, when we propose a bond for school construction, that's really an evaluation tool on how good we are as a school system. And this county, I've got to give you credit, has not turned down a bond here in decades. So I think there's an underlying good base of support in terms of the importance of what we're doing. Now, what I look for when I go into a school, I want to look at the instructional piece with the principal. How are they in the classrooms? What are they looking for when they're in the classrooms? When I go in and rate a teacher, I want more than just a check on a form. I want to know what's the feedback you're giving the teacher behind that. And that's what I'm looking for when I'm evaluating principals. It's, like I said, the management piece really is baseline for me. If you can't manage a school, then I'm not going to get the instructional piece that I need. And so I'm really looking to see, okay, you can manage the building, great, but can you do the instructional piece to improve student performance?
Okay. Speaking of teachers, we had a question from the audience regarding what we're doing to recruit and retain good teachers.
Well, we're fortunate we have UNCW. We get a real sneak peek at teachers before they walk out the door. And so a lot of those folks coming out of UNCWs are doing their internships and student teaching in our schools. If you've got kids in elementary schools, you probably got a student teacher in your building in this county. Same way with middle and high schools. So our principals are getting a real first look at a lot of those folks that are there. We also are one of the byproducts of the economy is we get more applications now in our teacher pool to look at. And so I'm working with my principals to encourage them to not only look at the folks we're getting in-house from the university, but to look at those folks coming in from other districts, and maybe an opportunity to get some veteran teachers. We did some staffing at one of our, I think it was one of our schools at Sunset that opened up, and we worked with the principal to make sure we looked at hiring some of those veteran teachers. So we've got a great pool of new folks coming in from the university, but we've also, because of our location, we are on a draw, as well as the economy, starting to see more folks coming in from the outside who want to come work here. So it's really helped our talent pool.
Okay. We've talked about some of the challenges facing the school system. Let's talk about some of the other challenges. I know one of the things we've talked about is the level of technology that you see in the schools. Talk to us about what you're seeing there and kind of what your plan is over the next few years regarding technology.
Well, what I see with technology is it's uneven. Some of our schools have more technology than others, and it's a couple things that do that. If it's a brand new school, we're going to build that school to the highest standard we can. So it's obvious that Holly Shelter, Castle Lane is two of our newest schools, have a level of technology above some of our other schools. Some of our schools that have a very supportive PTA, those PTAs have put funds into technology in that school. And then we have to use our technology funds, which are limited through, you have a telephone tax you pay called E-rate. Well, that E-rate money comes back to the schools as part of that telephone tax. And that's probably our largest source of funds to help put technology into the schools. And so what we're doing is our technology department, and Don Brinson is here, could talk more about that if you want to talk to her about identifying what a 21st century classroom looks like, what's base level technology, and then making sure that our technology in those classrooms are up to that level. But with funding being sort of hit or miss sometimes in terms of what we get, it's a little uneven. What I'd like to see us do is have somehow a dedicated revenue stream strictly for technology. In my previous county, Catawba County, the county commissioners voted a half-cent property tax strictly for technology. Now, Catawba County is probably as conservative, bedrock Republican area as you're going to get in the state. And they were willing to commit a half-cent to technology because they understood how important that was. And if we could do that same kind of dedicated revenue stream here, then we could really even out the technology across the board and turn it into the hands of students. Because just because a teacher has the technology doesn't mean that it's a 21st century classroom. The student in the classroom has to be using that technology. And it's not just about computers. It's about handheld devices, it's about iPads, netbooks, and making sure that those kinds of things are in the hands of our students. Because if I can put, example, an iPad in the hands of students, then maybe I don't have to buy textbooks. I can put all the textbooks on an iPad and hand that to a student. You talk about your kids coming home now with those heavy backpacks. Well, let's bring them home with a little notebook and put the textbooks on there. And we're not quite there because the textbook companies still aren't quite ready to give up the paper books yet, but we're getting there. Williston downtown is going to start doing a one-to-one iPad initiative next year with their 6th grade and then roll that up to 7th and 8th grade. And so we're hoping is that we don't have to buy textbooks, we can put all of that technology online, but to do that, I need buildings that are wired, because if I can't get online in one part of the building, then all of a sudden I've lost some of that usefulness of that product. Our principals are starting to do more of their evaluation piece with technology in the classroom, online, and that's actually giving me a whole lot better data. Some of our schools will do observations and they're looking for certain things, and they will do that as part of a piece of software that then aggregates that up, and they can look at their instructional practices in the building. But to do that, I got to get more technology into the schools, I got to get the buildings wireless, and I got to get the adults comfortable with that technology.
Okay. Another one of the challenges we're hearing a lot about in the media right now is bullying, and I believe Fran at table 13 has a question regarding bullying.
Good morning, Dr. Markey. I wanted to address the issue of critical learning and thinking with regards to bullying. If a student is so worried about being jumped, it's going to be hard for them to focus on their classroom work, critical thinking, and that development. And it also seems to me that the administration is reluctant to really address bullying, even though there's a zero tolerance policy. Can you speak a little bit about that?
In terms of our school, when it comes to bullying, the first thing is when students are bullied, they got to let us know about it. Then the principals have a protocol that they're supposed to follow as a result in terms of investigating that and reporting to that. We have a lady in our central office whose one sole responsibility is to investigate bullying incidences and work then with the school and the parents to put things in place to overcome and make sure that doesn't happen. Now that said, bullying is a serious issue. And it's not the old lunch money kind of issue where the big kid was the bully. Bullying now takes on whole different forms. And that's one of the dark sides of social media. It used to be if you got mad at somebody, you went in the corner, you cursed a little bit, and then you went on. Now you haul out your cell phone and you type a Facebook post and say that this person's a blankety blank blank, and then they get sent on to 15 other kids. And that starts a bullying chain. We're also starting to see something that I call social bullying, where instead of physical aggression, we're using exclusion as a form of bullying. Well, you don't have the right pocketbook to sit in this table because obviously you didn't buy it at the right store. And those are the other more subtle kinds of bullying that we're also starting to see. Well, you don't hang out here, well, you can't do that. And that's a harder one for us to combat. But if the kids will make the report to us at the school level, then we will intervene and try to put things in place to make sure that it doesn't happen. As you said, we have a zero tolerance for bullying. We have a very comprehensive program to intervene and put things in place, but we got to know about it. And that's the educational piece, talking to our students and having them come forward that if they're being bullied, being willing to talk to the adult to help put that in place. The other part of that is the supervision issue on the schools. Do we have adults supervising the right places where bullying may be occurring to make sure that we can prevent that as well? So it's a leadership piece in terms of supervision, and then it's also we've got to make sure we're following up. But if you've got kids, they've got to be willing to, if something happens, to let us know about it so that we can take action.
Past, present, future, digital. You live the moment. We'll make it last. Call us at 910-399-1820 or go online at ppfdigital.com.